Hello,
Welcome
back.
to standalone episode 18, A24 Quests, the 18th one.
Nailed
How's
it.
it going?
You hit that nail right on the head so hard it's dead.
We're back.
You killed it.
We haven't done an A24 Quest in a little bit.
It's been a hot minute.
And this is going to be a good episode because we're talking about two good movies. Have you rewatched The Lobster? What?
Okay, first of all, never seen The Lobster until yesterday. So rewatched isn't the correct term.
Oh, you were seeing it for the first time.
Yes.
Oh, have you seen? You've seen it now, though.
I have seen it now.
Okay, cool.
And I've rewatched all of but the ending of Killing of a Sacred Deer, which I rewatched also prior.
Yes, yes.
So yeah, it's been kind of an awful week.
It's been a Greek depression fest here, and well, The Lobster's not that depressing.
It's pretty
Well,
awful.
It's kind of depressing,
It's pretty awful.
but it's a comedy,
Is it?
sort of.
I mean, it's the blackest comedy
It's
I've
a
ever seen.
it's a very very black comedy, but it is technically a comedy.
So yeah, what do you want to talk about first, Colin?
Oh, I don't know. Let's say The Lobster because it came out first.
Cool.
The Lobster. Okay, if you haven't seen recently and you're not familiar with what these movies are, they're both directed by a man named Yorgos Lanthimos. They both feature Colin Farrell in the lead role, and they're both really weird. It's like Wes Anderson meets Stanley Kubrick meets just I don't know, man. I don't know how to describe it.
I mean, he's such a bizarre director. The way he makes his movies are so effective and bizarre that I don't think there is anybody else to relate him to. I think he's going to be who we relate others to when they decide to do stuff like this.
Absolutely. I think Yorgos Lanthimos is going to be a influential and revered director, and I believe he hasn't yet kind of he's still in the artsy realm, and not a lot of people are familiar with his work, and those that are either love it or hate it. I know some people that think he's just the most pretentious, overrated director in the world, but I think his movies are kind of brilliant. His last two, at least. I haven't seen his stuff before that. So let's get started about The Lobster. Now, The Lobster is a very, very, very dark comedy.
Yeah,
And,
I guess.
yeah, I just plot synopsis. There's this man, I want to say his name is David.
So in like a weird dystopian future of sorts.
Yes. His name's David, right? That sounds right.
Yeah, that sounds right.
His name's David, and he okay, in this future, everybody needs to have a partner. Everybody needs to have like a soulmate and start a family. If you're single for a certain amount of time, you get abducted. Well, not abducted. You get mandatory sentenced to this island where it's like a resort place where single people go to find their soulmates.
Yeah.
But the catch is, if you find your soulmate, you get to be released back into society. And if you don't, you get turned into an animal.
Yes. An animal of your choice.
Yes.
Which, that's where the premise of, the title,
The lobster comes because
in.
David chooses he wants to be a lobster.
Because he enjoys swimming and he wants to live to be 100 years old.
Yes.
That's...
And
what
you can,
reason?
You can see how strange this movie is, and believe me, that doesn't even scratch the surface. It's
Nope.
a truly bizarre movie.
Yep.
And I liked it a lot. I was not super keen on it the first time I've watched it, but I've seen it, I want to say 3 times now, and by the 3rd time I was super into it. I don't know which I prefer between The Lobster and The Killing of a Sacred Deer, but I think it's probably The Lobster, just because The Lobster's got a lot more twists and turns and a lot more meat on its bones than Killing of a Sacred Deer. Killing of a Sacred Deer is very simple, but we'll get to that.
Yeah.
You got anything to say about The Lobster?
Mean, it's very good. I would suggest this to more people than I would suggest Killing of a Sacred Deer.
It's slightly more watchable than The Killing of a Sacred Deer.
But at the same time, it's more bizarre.
Yeah, it's weirder, but it's more palatable.
Yeah.
I think it's because it's not as... The atmosphere isn't as oppressive, and it's not as just, like, depressing.
Well, and just because of the fact that it's not as weird, I would probably suggest Killing of a Sacred Deer to, like, normies, I guess is the term.
I suppose, but they would find it pretty boring. At least The Lobster's got, like...
I don't know, man. Killing of a Sacred Deer, there's a lot of crazy crap happening.
That's true.
Especially in that later half. I mean, The Lobster is just so weird that I think it'll turn a lot of people off automatically.
Yeah, I suppose.
Like my parents, I don't think they would like The Lobster at all. I don't think they'd like Killing of a Sacred Deer a lot either, but I think they'd like it more than The Lobster.
Fair enough.
So, that's just my own little scale for the two.
Mm.
But I mean, The Lobster, it's weird. I mean, it's in this like weird future. John C. Reilly's in it.
Yeah. I like his character in it, but then again, I like him in anything.
There's like weird policies that you can't, like, you have to do certain things at certain times. You can't masturbate. You can't. Every male gets mild sexual stimulation, but not to completion.
Yes.
Which is the most bizarre part of this movie.
It is absolutely. It's where the movie hits peak, just craziness. Not craziness. Yes, craziness. Not craziness in the Killing of a Sacred Deer sense, but in the like what is happening right now is when the maid comes in, and yeah,
yeah, and just nothing is graphic in the sense that you don't see anything.
It's a weird scene because they're both fully clothed.
Yes,
it's not graphic, and yet it is just the most uncomfortable thing.
Oh yeah, because it's just Colin Farrell saying, "This is awful. Can we not do this today?" And she's like, "Well, we must." And then she just proceeds to like rub her butt, clothed butt, on his groin, which is also clothed. And then she's like, "Wow, you got hard faster today. All right, bye."
That's it.
And then he's like, "No, please, just a little longer." and then she leaves, and he's like, "This is awful."
Truly awful.
And it's just...
and when we talk like this, if you're not familiar with Yorgos' style, I feel like most people watching this are, but if you're not familiar with his style, that is how they talk. There's absolutely no emotion in their voices. In The Lobster, it makes more, in the world of the movie, the way people talk makes more sense because the people on this island are like mostly sociopaths with no real emotions. In Killing of a Sacred Deer, in the world, it's less explained why everybody talks so mechanically, but in The Lobster, there's like a pretty decent reason for it.
Mm-hmm. Well, and in Killing of a Sacred Deer, it's supposed to be happening in what I imagine would be our time. Meanwhile, The Lobster is set in this like weird dystopian.
Yeah, or like I don't even know if I would call it like a dystopian future, more like an alternate reality.
Kinda, yeah.
Where with a dystopian government where you have to, and the interesting thing is like a lot of the people who are sent to this island, they form relationships that are just a ruse to get off the island. And, like, it just doesn't... It forms a society where nobody truly loves each other, but you have to appear like you're a functioning member of a society. And it's pretty clever commentary if you really dig into it. And, like I said, there's a lot of meat to The Lobster. You have to crack that shell and get to the meat.
It's very weird.
It is weird.
So, okay, so let's, like, give a basic plot synopsis without giving away the ending.
Yeah.
I mean, you could give away the ending, and once again, it wouldn't matter.
Well, the movie comes in 2 acts. It's kind of like it's very similar to Full Metal Jacket, where there's the part in Full Metal Jacket. There's the part in the boot camp, and there's the part when they're in the war, and it's very similar in The Lobster. There's the part where they're on the island. There's the part where he's off the island, or rather, he's escaped the facility, and much like Full Metal Jacket, I think the movie loses a bit of steam once he escapes the facility. At that point, it's the narrative stays strong, and it actually provides a cool counterpoint to the first half of the movie, but it just gets a little less compelling, in my opinion, when he's out in the wilderness with those people.
Well, okay, so I have a theory about that. Well, okay, so let's get into the plot synopsis. So David's single. He goes to the island with his brother, who has now been turned into a dog.
Yes.
He ends up getting his own little room and yada yada. He meets two guys, one of them being John C. Reilly, who has a lisp, and another man who has a limp. Then, he goes about his day. He tries to hook up with some women. The guy with the limp ends up hooking up with this girl with the bloody nose. She constantly gets bloody noses.
Yes.
And he does so by giving himself bloody noses by slamming his face into hard things.
Yeah.
Or cutting his nose with a penknife.
Mm-hmm.
And so basically, once again, the whole sham relationship kind of stuff happens.
And they bond over this very basic trait.
Yeah, well,
and a lot of characters in the movie have like one trait.
Yeah.
And that's kind of an interesting way to write characters, because it's like John C. Reilly is just kind of
he's the guy with the lisp.
Yeah, he's got a lisp. Ben Winshaw's got a limp. And the woman that David falls in love with or whatever is a sociopath.
Cold-hearted woman is what they call her. And David, he's nearsighted.
Yes, right.
And then the girl he actually falls in love with out in the woods, she is also nearsighted.
Mm-hmm.
But then it starts getting into a little bit more dimensions as far as people as soon as he leaves the compound, which is interesting. Yeah. Because not only is she nearsighted, but she loves rabbits. She enjoys, doing other things. Which isn't normal for the rest of the people, it seems. So anyway, the two get together, and then David gets together with the cold-hearted woman by pretending to let her drown or choke on an olive, an olive seed, or what are they, core? Mm-hmm. What do they call those? Olive pit.
Sure.
Yeah. And then she's like, "I wasn't choking. I think we are a perfect match." Yeah. And then he's just like, "I agree." And so then they get put together. Mm. And then she kicks his dog to death. Yeah. His dog brother.
Yeah,
kicks his dog brother to death.
Forgot about that, yeah.
He then ends up crying, and she slaps him and says, "I knew you were lying." And this is the climax of this first act. And she runs after him, and he runs away, and she's going to tell everybody, and he's going to be single again and probably turned into a dog for lying, or some awful animal, not a lobster.
I forget.
And then he ends up, what does it do? He tranks her?
Yeah, he tranquilizes her, and he drags her into the animal room. And we don't see what happens, but it's implied that he turns her into an animal.
Yes, and it's unspecified what he turns her into, and every time he was asked, he always said it's none of your business, basically.
Yeah, it's just kind of there's a cinematic term for this, like a mystery that has no resolution, because I don't know, whatever.
One thing I did forget to mention is that at this place, they go to dances and do stuff to be social, basically, and learn how to be with a partner and why that is a good thing. So they have demonstrations up on stage, like why a man would want to be eating with a woman, because if he chokes, she can help him.
Yeah, it's very not emotional, and it's all very logical.
Yes.
It's just like, you're less likely to get assaulted if you have a man with you, or like if you're choking in a restaurant, he can perform the Heimlich on you, and it's just so weird and lovely.
Oh, I don't know if that's the term.
I don't know. I it's a delightful movie because well, that's just it's this very dry comedy to it, and I appreciate it. Anyway, go on.
And then there's the hunts. So on this island, or on this resort, you have 40 days to find a partner, otherwise you're turned into an animal. And the only way to lengthen the amount of time you have to find a partner is to go on these hunts and tranquilize single people
Yeah.
that are running in the woods. Like,
you go out and you hunt the people that have failed before you.
Yep,
Yeah.
and you trank them, and then they pick them up, and they take them back, and they turn them into animals.
Yeah.
And that's how you get more days to meet more people, to hopefully find your match.
Yeah, it's pretty messed up.
Yeah, it's really weird. And then Act 2 starts, so after he turns the cold hard lady into
and then
into
there's
an
that
animal.
other woman who's trying to get with David, and she's just desperate. And
Oh,
then
the biscuit lady.
Yeah, and then she throws herself out a window.
Yeah, that was awful.
It's difficult trying to describe. You can't really sell this movie to somebody as a comedy for how just completely dark and wretched everything is in it.
And she threw herself out of like the first floor.
Yeah, and
or
then
something, and
she
she's
didn't
just
die.
screaming.
She's on the floor, like her limbs are broken, and she's just screaming, and it goes on forever.
And David just uses that to get with the cold-hearted woman. He's like, "Oh, I really hope she dies quickly. I don't want to hear her from my room.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, I hope it lasts for a long time." And it's like, oh my god,
It's really horrendous.
it's awful. It's really awful.
And I described this movie as one of the funniest movies I'd seen from this year, and I stand by that. But the humor is really offset by some just completely horrendous things, and it's like some of it is funny in a dark way, I would say. What's a good example? John C. Reilly getting his hand stuck in a toaster.
That was bad.
Was somewhat I don't know why, but I found it
That's
humorous.
not funny.
Maybe I'm just a horrible person.
I think you're just a horrible person.
But it is a comedy, and there's a lot of dark humor, very dark humor.
Yeah, John C. Reilly's confronted about masturbating in his room after the moderate stimulation. And he's like, yes, I did. And they're like, all right, punishment, we're going to have to stick your hand in this toaster.
Yeah.
And so they just take his hand, they put it in the toaster, they close it, and then they have people hold his hand in there as he just starts screaming.
Yeah.
And it's not funny. Yeah. Colin is wrong. It's awful. It's truly awful.
It's a nervous laughter.
Maybe.
Yeah. Because everybody's just watching. And I like John C. Reilly, and I enjoy seeing him putting his hand in a toaster.
It's not funny. It really isn't. It's really awful.
Anyway.
And then Act 2 starts, and he escapes from the place, and he runs off into the woods.
And he finds Léa Seydoux. Or however you pronounce her name.
What?
The girl who was in Spectre, the Bond girl from Spectre. He finds her out in the woods.
I believe you.
Have you seen Spectre?
Yeah.
Okay, it's her. He finds her out.
So he finds Christoph Waltz?
Yes.
Okay.
Christoph Waltz was my favorite Bond girl.
Yeah.
I mean,
oh my god, that would be wonderful.
He flirts with Bond.
That would be wonderful.
That would be great, yeah.
Imagine. It would just become like a dynamic duo of sorts.
Yeah.
Oh, that'd be beautiful.
It would be kind of like Django Unchained. That's it.
It's exactly like Django Unchained.
That's it. You know, who's the guy that everybody's clamoring for? The dude who was in Pacific Rim and Luther.
Charlie Day.
Yes. No, you know who I mean.
Idris Elba.
Idris Elba, okay. You get Idris Elba to be Bond, and then get Christoph Waltz back, and then reenact Django Unchained with Bond.
What? So wait, when is this set?
In the 1800s.
Alright.
It just Bond takes like a drastic turn. It's like a period piece now.
Wow.
That'd be fantastic. Anyway,
and
back
it still has like major
and it's still got the Bond music. It's just like he's like a runaway slave, and it's just like do 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 do. It's like, oh.
It's just like major commentary on slavery as well.
Yeah.
But it's still a Bond movie.
It's like, no matter the color of our skin, we're all still humans.
Oh Oh wow! I never. And Judi Dench is still just Q.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
It's just at a certain point he touches his ear and he talks and Q's on the other way. It's like not even established.
Nothing in his ear because it's the 1800s. But...
And then it turns out she's like a spirit that guides him.
And gives him futuristic weapons from like Men in Black.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'll be good.
This is a stapler, but it's a grenade.
Two things that aren't invented yet. That's the best part.
Yeah.
Oh god. Here, have this car, but it's also a spaceship. And he's like,
hold up, what's a car?
He's like, what?
First of all, let's take this
Hold
one
up.
step at a time. Anyway, back to the Lobster.
Oh, that'd be so funny.
Yeah.
How has that not been done by like a great satirical
I mean, who would do
director?
that? Us. Yeah, I guess. So if you're listening, whoever owns the rights to James Bond currently, I want to say MGM.
We're coming for you.
We're gonna make the next Bond film set in the 1800s with a runaway slave as James Bond.
Oh, good. Anyway.
Yeah.
Act 2 of Killing the Sacred Deer. He finds people in the woods. He meets up with them. They teach him how to hide in the woods. They tell him to dig his own grave. He meets this girl who's also nearsighted. He falls in love with her immediately.
Yeah. And this group of people is the exact opposite extreme from the like you gotta be a couple people. These people, it's like no pairing, no physical contact whatsoever,
no helping each other.
Yeah, if you even look at the opposite gender the wrong way, we will. What is it? They get like mutilated.
Yeah, you get the red kiss, which they chop off your lips and then you're forced to kiss each other. Or you can get the even worse one that they mentioned, which is called the red intercourse, which they don't describe, but you can imagine. Which is pretty flippin' awful.
Yeah, and this is a good comedy.
It's not.
And it's this half of the movie is the opposite extreme. It's like the first half is just like society puts too much faith and too much value and too much stock in forced relationships, and you can be happy without one. And the second half is, but on the other hand, relationships are, important and can be good. It's like neither extreme is okay. You just live your life the way you want. Is ultimately the message.
Which is great if you can get past everything awful that's happening.
Yeah.
So he falls in love with the girl. They end up making a secret language. Everything that kind of happens in this part is kind of nonsensical. Like,
sure, they have iPod parties.
They have iPod parties. I mean, I think they're actually CD.
Sure.
Like Walkman parties.
I just call them iPod parties because of IT Crowd.
But anyway, so at one point he gets like hunted by John C. Reilly, and he's like, "You're my best friend." He's like, "Well, I don't think I'm your best friend." And anyway, John C. Reilly gets stabbed in the leg by the lady that he likes. So she helps him, and that's when they really start getting into the lovey-dovey relationship stuff. They create a secret language. They end up raiding the mansion or the compound.
Yeah.
At one point, and that's weird and intense.
I love the scene on the boat.
Yeah.
I like that scene.
Yeah, where David confronts the man with the limp and the girl with the nosebleed and tells them that their relationship is a sham.
That scene's got this very subtle visual humor to it, because him storming the boat and jumping down with like a gun should be like a very sudden attack thing, and he just kind of like casually walks down and he's like, "Hey," I forget what he says, but you don't remember what I mean?
Yeah.
It's very subtle, and I don't know if a lot of people would really appreciate it, but I appreciate
mean,
how subtle his entrance is. He just kind of
that
walks
scene
down and nobody
is-
really reacts. He's just like,
That scene is probably the closest to an actual comedy that this movie gets. I'd probably agree with that.
sure, yeah.
Um,
And like the Ben Winshaw, the limp guy, and his wife have like children,
yeah.
and like they're all just terrible. Yeah, they're all just like completely emotionless and like, yeah. And Ben Whishaw is just like an unlikable character, and I love him.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the end of this movie, because I'm just gonna spoil it because it doesn't matter. Do you think it matters?
No, I mean, no. At this point, like, go watch the movie. At this point, you know, like if it's sounds like it's for you, it's probably for you. If it doesn't sound like it's for you, it's probably not for you. There you go. You could stop it here. But at the end, he stabs his eye out with a knife.
Not true. At the end, so his wife ends up getting blinded by the leader of the singles club.
Yeah.
And then she's upset, and so then he's like, "We're gonna get out of here anyway." So David takes her, and they go into the city, and they go to a diner, and they sit down, and he's like, "I'm gonna stab it out with a knife," and then he goes to the bathroom with a knife. And then it just goes back to her sitting in a booth, and you never see what happens.
Right. So I guess you could either he did it or he didn't do it, and it is one of those things like it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It's bad either way. Either
upsetting.
either to prove his love, he stabbed his own eye out, or he just like left her there. And either way, it's pretty messed up. So like.
Yeah, it's upsetting.
It's an open-ended ending that doesn't have to have an answer. Like I think I like the way it is. So yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't want an actual answer to that.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't want to see either of those results.
Yeah.
But I didn't want to be put in that situation either. So there's also that.
Yeah.
The Lobster was a good movie. Let's talk about Killing of a Sacred Deer.
Yes.
For a hot minute.
The Killing of a Sacred Deer, I just rewatched it very recently. I've seen The Lobster somewhat recently, but I didn't rewatch it specifically for this, but I've seen it enough times that I remember it pretty well. I just rewatched The Killing of a Sacred Deer, and I liked it more. Well, maybe just about the same. I mean, it's difficult to rewatch it because you know what's coming. But that kind of added to the experience. The Killing of a Sacred Deer is not a comedy.
What? Really?
Yeah.
Surprised you don't think that this is the best comedy of the year.
The thing about The Killing of a Sacred Deer, going to that from The Lobster is a comedy. The Killing of a Sacred Deer is a horror movie. Now, if you take into account how upsetting The Lobster is as a comedy, I was a little leery. I was a little not looking forward to going into Killing of a Sacred Deer because it's like he's not even going to be humorous with this one. It's just horrible, and it is. It is just horrible. You want to give a plot synopsis of this one?
Sure. So you have David.
Yeah, whatever.
Might as well be.
Whatever his name is. He plays practically the same character in this.
Yeah, except now he's not an architect. He's a doctor.
One could say this is David after he left his love in that diner, and then he went and started a family. This could be considered a sequel.
I
to
suppose.
Lobster. You could see it. You could look at it that way, but
And it could be kind of funny because they ask him in The Lobster if he's a doctor.
Really?
And he says, "No, I'm an architect." And they're like, "Bummer, we really need a doctor." And so if he's a doctor in this movie, that might be kind of a little funny nod.
Yeah, sure.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway,
So
he's in this place where he's meeting this boy, and this boy's weird, and he killed his dad, and it's dumb, and his boy is like, "You killed my dad, so I'm gonna give your family this horrible disease, and you have to pick which one of them you're gonna kill, and when you kill one of them, the disease will stop." And that's the whole thing. And then he does, and it's over.
It's an extremely simple premise and a simple setup. And whereas in The Lobster, the strength in the movie relies on the strength of the premise. It's such an odd situation and such a weird sequence of events. In The Killing of a Sacred Deer, it doesn't so much rely on the premise, because the premise is very simple and straightforward and pretty ordinary for the first half of the movie. It gets like incrementally weirder, but the strength is in the dialogue, the cinematography, and the music. That's where this movie really, all the effort went into that. Just making it a visual, atmospheric, unnerving, unsettling, uncomfortable experience. It's more about the experience than the story. And that could be for some. Some might find it really boring because they're just like, The Lobster was super crazy. This is just people talking. But I don't know.
But then there's also the part where he decides to kidnap the boy and hold him in his basement and beat the living daylights out of him.
Yeah, there is that. But even that's pretty subdued and mostly implied.
I don't know, man. The boy literally takes a bite out of his own arm.
That's true. The movie gets a little. That's like the only. There are like two parts in the movie that get like actually violent, and it's that scene. The kid who I forget his name. The actor who plays the kid does a pretty good job, especially in the scene where he's tied up in the basement and he's explaining how the justice works, and he says, "Let me give you an example," and then he like yanks Colin Farrell's arm towards him and he takes a bite out of it, and then like Colin Farrell recoils, and then he's like, "Now," I forget what he says. "Now, you want me to apologize for doing that? Should I say I'm sorry, or would it be a little better if I were to do this?" And then he just takes a bite out of his own arm, and he's like, "This is retribution. This is what you deserve," or something like that. And it's a really cool scene, I think, especially since it's so horrifying.
Yeah, that's the whole movie.
Yeah.
It's the whole movie.
This movie is just unpleasant to watch.
Yep.
From start to finish, it's just not a good time.
Yep.
I love it, honestly. It's probably one of my favorites of the last year or so.
It's very well made. It's very, very well made.
Yeah.
I like the fact that it's so well made.
You don't like the fact that you've had to watch it twice now?
Yeah, that's very true.
That's completely fair.
Yeah, I've seen it twice, and I've hated myself both times for seeing it.
Yeah.
Don't watch it, or do. Put yourself through misery. Be like Colin.
Yeah. If you just like feeling horrible and just feeling shallow and empty and just bad.
If you want your movie to make you feel something, this might be the thing for you.
Yeah.
Because boy, does it make you feel like garbage.
This is just the most. It's one of those movies where I always my main thing with horror movies is people were like, "Oh, it wasn't scary. You should call it a thriller and not a horror movie." If you try to call this not a horror movie, I'll punch you in the gullet. The look on your face, you're like, "Whoa." If you try to call this not a horror movie, you don't get horror, and you shouldn't be allowed to watch movies. That's my thing in this. There's not a single scare in this movie. There's no scares. Would you agree with that?
I agree with that.
There's no scares. It's all. There's no jump scares. There's no really frightening moments, outward frightening moments. Now, I hear you ask, if this movie's not frightening, how could you call it a horror movie? Well, that's because you are brainwashed and you think horror means there's a spooky killer who's going to jump out of a closet and kill me. Or there's a monster. Or there's a ghost. And it's got to be spooky and jump scares. And that's like, yes, that is what modern horror is. But like, It was no movie in the last year that has made me feel more dread than Killing of a Sacred Deer. Maybe Hereditary, but they're pretty on par. Hereditary is more of like an outright scary movie. This is not scary. This is just nihilistic and hopeless and just...
Here you go.
Yeah.
Here's the definition of horror.
Yeah.
All right, the first one. An intense feeling of fear, shock, or disgust.
Yeah.
Which, yeah, this movie is disgusting.
This is a disgust kind of movie. Where
And
you're just
shock.
sitting... Yeah, shock too. So this applies. This movie is utterly horrific. And not in a graphic sense, just in a psychological sense.
In some graphic sense.
Some graphic
Mildly
sense.
graphic
Sure,
sense.
mildly graphic in a couple scenes near the end. But for the most part, like, the whole movie is just kind of this tension, and it's just doesn't let up. Like I said, when I was going back, and I'm doing a best of compilation of our podcast, and I went back to the episode where we initially talked about this movie, and this was like right after I had rewatched it. And what I said, and I had forgotten about this when I saw it in the theater with you, when we walked out, I was actually shaking.
Mm-hmm.
Because the movie, it starts off, it's just kind of like... Oh, the first shot is of what I believe is a real footage of an open heart surgery. Of a heart surgery.
I believe
it looked
so, yeah.
very much looked like real footage. And it's just this long, uncomfortable shot of a human heart beating inside a chest cavity. So right away, you're kind of off-put by that. And then the movie starts at a baseline of like, this is kind of weird, and it ratchets up to like, this is getting weirder, this is getting stranger, this is getting uncomfortable, and then it plateaus up to, okay, this is actually really freaky and really terrifying, and then it just keeps ratcheting up, and at the end it's just this, it just climaxes right at the end, and it's just awful to sit through.
Yep.
So if that sounds like your kind of thing, go for it.
Yep. So yeah, those are the movies of the week.
Yeah.
I don't even know what I would pick. As far as my favorite, I mean, I'm gonna pick The Lobster just because it's a new one that I hadn't seen, but I don't know if I could actually pick one over the other.
I think
They're both very, very well made and both very upsetting.
Yeah, I think The Killing of a Sacred Deer is more effective than The Lobster, and it stuck with me more than The Lobster, but I would probably pick The Lobster. Just because I like that dark comedy. As much as I loved Killing of a Sacred Deer, I kind of miss that Yorgos Lanthimos dark comedy. And it looks like The Favorite, his next movie, will have plenty of dark comedy, so I'm looking forward to that.
Alright. Well, Colin, I suppose the time has come.
Yeah.
We finally get to pick our movie of the week this week.
Hey,
and
nice.
by we, I mean you, I believe.
Oh, okay. I thought it was you. I guess
Is it me? Because I thought it was you.
I think it's me. I'm probably wrong. Hold on.
So we have De Palma.
Okay, let me get a list up.
Which is the movie that we are mandatorily being forced to watch. So De Palma. I don't know anything about De Palma.
Me neither. When is Under the Silver Lake coming out? April 19th, 2019. Darn it, that's a long ways away. I can wait, though. I really want to see that one. Okay. Let's say, we gotta lighten it up a little bit, so let's say Hereditary.
I'm gonna kill you.
No, we're not doing
I'm gonna kill you, Colin.
We're not doing Hereditary.
I have to kill you now.
We gotta take at least a week off.
I have to murder you.
We have to take at least a week off before
It's
covering
mandatory.
Hereditary.
I have to kill you now.
I'm sorry, that's fine. Can we just do a ghost story again?
No, we can't.
You have no clue how much I love that movie.
I
Well, I
know.
guess you have some clue
I
how
know.
much I love that movie.
Yeah.
Okay. What is our... Okay, hold on. I'm just gonna get a sense. De Palma.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a big man's face.
Big men's.
It's a big man's face.
I would say Into the Forest, but we're going to see that pretty soon.
I mean, we can do it.
I'm going to see if I can find a better one. This makes for excellent.
Ooh.
Ooh.
Just seeing Robert Pattinson's face in Good Time is funny to me.
Oh, we can do The Killing of a Sacred Deer.
No, we can't.
Okay. Jeez, we've seen so many of these. I'm running out of things to pick.
No, you're not.
How about How to Talk to Girls at Parties?
Sure, let's do it.
I hear this movie. I saw a trailer for this movie and it looked really cool. I hear it sucks. So let's do it.
Let's do it.
Let's just see what we think of it.
So we got De Palma and How to Talk to Girls at Parties.
All right.
That'll be next week. Next week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.